And then this is, here's one of the big rolls here. Oh, sorry. One of the big rolls here. This is how, this is one of the smaller rolls actually, but this is the guys working here, getting it through the machine. And then you see he has a club there because they have to also tap the paper because the roll has to be wound up tightly for shipping and all that. So that's one of the things to make sure there's no air pockets in the roll. They're making it sounding it that way. You had to do it, sounding it enough to see that it was solid, but not enough that you damaged it. So there was, it looks like a pretty blunt thing they're doing there, but there was a lot of talent that went involved just with that too. And they really tried to be a zero emissions facility. And that's like a term we talked before about things that LaMonte did that nobody did till they were around. Well, zero emissions was something they tried really hard to do. There was no waste in the place. And any waste that was coming off the factory or off the line right at the beginning had to be accounted for. So if there was a certain amount of paper that came out of the machines and it was damaged, they had to measure it and write it down there. It was called broke. It was considered broke, the paper. That's the term they used. But they had to account for everything, had to account for all their waste material because it all had to be shredded. Because remember, they're trying to keep people from doing things for forgery, so they don't want their paper to get out there in blank and be used for something. So everything got shredded, baled, and taken away for recycling. And same with a lot of their inks and all that. They were reused, they were recaptured and reused, so they didn't have a lot of waste there. And then everything in there, we're going to show some paper that we have over here too. Even the scrap paper that was blank and was able to use was recycled to the employees. So it's just another showing. Bobby did us some flashbacks there, moving a roll of paper here. That's what you had, right? A little hand truck like that. You had to kind of balance it and move it around. And this, I think, is Jeannie's sister. I'm not sure. We don't know who she is. We don't have her name. But this was the last roll. This was a historic picture taken because it was the last roll of paper that was run in Nutley back in '69. So if anybody knows her name, let me know. And oh, there's a nickname up there. We see one nickname. We talked to not all the guys worked under the real name. So my dad was Sam Strauss. That was his nickname because he used to go to Strauss auto stores all the time and talk about it. So they named him Sam Strauss. So. And then Joe Hiruzzi, he worked there and his brother worked there too. A lot of family, a lot of brothers worked there, multiple family members, wives, sisters. So it was a real family operation in more ways than one. Again, that's Dad on the left and then Joe on the right is doing their last roll of paper. And this is we don't have his name either for some reason. No. But that's, again, seeing the roll. This is the calendar department. We talked before about calendaring the paper, and this is where you have to take the paper that's already been printed and put it into a machine that would polish it and make it flat. Because there's two sides to the paper, which I never really knew. There's the felt side and the wire side on a piece of paper. And only some of the people that worked in the plant really knew how to tell the front and the back from a piece of paper. But it made a huge difference in the printing, in the process, and in the quality of what they made. Most things were printed on the felt side, but there were occasionally someone who wanted it on the wire side for some reason, a customer. That was a special request. That means they had to unwind the paper and wind it back up again and start all over because it was wound in reverse. So this is a New York Times article. This shows actually, we like this one because it shows the finishing department. And this is where a lot of the paper, once the big rolls come off the machines and out of the calendar department, then they go onto the tables and they're cut into smaller sheets. We see there they're getting ready to ship them out. And this is, they had to cut it to a spec. And the specs again on this were very, very tight because it would go off to printers now. It would go like to Deluxe Check. They used to be up on Darling Avenue and other check places or stock certificate places or railroad tickets or train tickets. So they would process it into the size that was requested and then send it off via truck or train, mostly truck, to where it had to get to. So that's that department there. And the fun part about this department, this is where everybody tried to be friendly with the people working there, because this is where you got your scrap paper for your kids. Because the waste that would come out of there would be blank, and then we actually have a sample over there of the paper. So anybody who worked at LaMonte's, their kids had a paper supply for everything they wanted. In fact, Dad was so good at getting paper out of there, because they had to be approved. You had to be initialed, it had to go to security to take that paper out to make sure it wasn't something inside the pack. So Dad still has 2 packs of paper from when he worked there, so he truly has a lifetime supply of scrap paper from LaMonte's. And that's, let's see, that's Paul Haggerty. Paul Haggerty, he was a really good guy. He was in charge of the lab, and he was one of the guys that did all the color work. He was really good at that, making sure the chemicals were right. We like that one because it's got a lot of background, all the different chemicals and stuff. Yeah, the hazmat guy's a nightmare now, I guess, but back then we didn't care about it. And these are just some other shots inside some of the office areas. That's Fred Gallagher. He was another one of the lab technicians. He's the one who would go around to the machines to be sure that you were doing the right thing, that they had everything running properly for colors. And then Johnny Fenji, he's a character. He's got one of the derogatory names. They used to call him Cuckoo. But if you notice now, you see him dressed up in his shirt and tie. He was actually a production fellow who worked on the machinery. That was his commuting outfit. When he left home in the morning, his neighbors saw him leave the house like that and come home like that. But when he was at work, he was just in the work clothes and t-shirts like everybody else. But he had his image he was doing. He was a good guy, though, they said. And that's Willie Herutzi. He was one of the mechanics that helped work on the machinery to keep everything going, because all the machines were inside, and they required a lot of maintenance. They had to be oiled every day, they had to be clean, they had to keep the rollers clean, keep the felts right. So there was a lot of maintenance on the machinery in there that went on. Now we have Charlie and another fellow. This is just a parking lot, and we see some of the old cars from the 60s. And this is the etching department. The etching department. This is where we talked about the steel cylinders that are put into the machine. So each one has like an emblem on it or an engraving. So their job is to make sure that all the emblems were sharp. That they had to like maybe file them a little bit or dig them out if they got filled up with things, so you would get a sharp image on the paper and all that. So that's the big rolls of steel rolls that came out. That's Johnny Nugent. It's one of the last days having a beer before they went home. And this is they had in-house people too. Bill Voss was an electrician. We like that because it's got the train platform again. We can see it's overgrown at that point, but at one point there was a very, very active rail siding, with Erie Lackawanna Group bringing in material there. And also there was a siding over to the Black Prince Distillery or the Nichols Hat Factory. They had their own siding right across from that also. And then later on we got electric forklifts so we can move all the machinery and all the paper around like gentlemen now, not have to break our backs. Another warehouse fella. Kind of looks like Ed from the Diamond Springs. There's our unknown female again working in the office there. Some more unknown people working up there. If anybody knows who they are, see me later if you can identify them. And then just the guys on a coffee break. We got Willie again, Bill Voss, and then Jack Abel. He used to live on Wharton Avenue. He was a neighbor of mine back when I was growing up. And then we have Walter Nijinsky and Johnny Nugent and another female. We don't know who they are. Just trying to document some of the people that worked there before the plant closed. Now John Frey, he was a boiler mechanic. So they had their own standalone boilers. We saw the water towers in a couple of the pictures. And they had their own boilers also. And the boilers were used to make steam for the process. And one of the things that with the boilers was they had to redo the lining on them from time to time. So they had to take all the fire brick out and reline it and put new fire brick in there. So one of the other things that LaMonte did was give us the brick. They would make a pile of the old brick out in the parking lot, and everybody would back up their car and fill their trunk up with brick. and take it home and make patios or sidewalks at their house. So if you see any of that brownish brick over there around town, that means that somebody in that property at one time had a legacy with LaMonte. But again, they try to recycle everything, even the box cars. The wood that was in the box cars, the 2x4s and the 4x4s that were used for shipping. On your lunch hour, you went out there with a pencil, put your name on it. After hours, you went out with your crowbar, took the 2x4s out, took it home and built things. LaMonte, they were happy. They got the box car taken apart and made simple inside again. And the men were happy because they got a bunch of 2x4s to take home and pound the nails out of it and use again. So. And that's West St. Grace. He was one of the foremans in the process department. He was a good guy. He lived over on Cleveland Avenue in Nutley, and then later in Clifton. Real nice guy. That's just at his house. And that's Walter Policourt. So he was another fellow that worked there in the process department. Just some cool little cars there. And then we have, on the left is Tony Merle, right? That's Tony Merle? He didn't come, right? Is he here? No. Okay, Tony Merle on the left, you might recognize him. He was in charge of the soup at the ShopRite up until a couple of years ago in Nutley there. It was his retirement job. And then we got Sammy Farisi on the other side. So that was just a party in the backyard at our house. And Walter Nijinsky again. Another Sid Stone, another alias, that was his name. Don't know where that came from, but that was Dad's 54 Chevy over there on the right that we went to the drive-ins in. And that's Joe Crocco. You know, not all the guys had cars either. You know, when they first opened the plant, parking was out on Kingsland Street. Even when Dad worked there in the late 40s or in the early 50s, there was no parking lot. You parked on Kingsland Street. And then later on, they developed a parking lot. But a lot of the fellows did come in by bus by Mass.